Hi, everyone, and welcome back to our Heroes Biographies. Today, we are going to get to know a hero that I personally admire so much, and I think we all have heard so much about him. I'm talking about the incredible David. Today, we're going to learn what makes him such a biblical hero here on Heroes to Hero Biographies. Joining me today for this very, very exciting conversation is my friend Elroy. Elroy, how you doing? How are you? What's going on?
I'm good, Kenya. What's up? I'm really excited to be here talking about the Heroes app. I think this is going to go down as one of the greatest apps in app history, and so I'm excited to just have people play the game and learn more about Bible heroes.
I agree with you 1000%. We've been here talking about the heroes' biographies. I've been watching all the behind the scenes of the games, how we got made. And I know that people are very excited to finally be able to play this. I'm excited to just compete with everyone. Like, I just want to be like, look at my score. Like, can you beat that? I'm a, I'm a bit of a, like a Bible trivia kind of person.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited for Heroes too. And I'm excited for our conversation today about King David. I have to admit, David is one of my personal favorites. I think that he has such a complicated story. The first time I think we encounter David is when we're really young in church, in Sabbath school, or wherever. And we find out, about him and being able to defeat lions and bears to take care of his sheep. And we know that he ends up fighting Goliath and he wins with just a stone and just throwing it on his forehead and he collapses. And it's such a crazy story. And it's an exciting story. It's almost, when you read it, it's almost like watching a movie. And we know he ends up being king of Israel. And we know all about the songs that he writes, the poetry, everything. And we know about his complicated, history, especially when it comes to women. But also, there are just so many beautiful details about his life and the way that he loved God. So today I have some questions, and I'm hoping that you can help us understand David a little bit deeper, okay?
I hope so too.
All right. Well, the first question that we have today is, Elroy, why do we like David's story so much? Because I don't think there's anyone who has read the story of David and hasn't enjoyed at least some aspect of it.
Well, I think first off, we get a lot of chapters about this young man. I remember you were talking about how our first encounter with David is for us is usually at a very young age. And it's not only just a young age for us, but it's also a young age for David. David, according to the word, is the youngest of 8 sons. And it seems like God has an affinity with the youngest and the least of these. And we see those narratives played out from as early as Genesis. But when it's David's turn, in First Samuel, God is looking for a new king. I mean, Saul has messed up. His ego has gotten the better of him, and the Spirit of God kind of departs from, well, not kind of, does depart from Saul. And so at this point, God is ready to select another king. And so this time, it's not chosen by people, but it's chosen by God. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things, that God chooses us. And even if we may be rejected by men, we can be accepted by God. And he is not looking at the external qualities, but he is looking at the heart. And he very much defines that as we see the older sons of Jesse kind of pass by one as Samuel is sent to figure out which king to anoint of Jesse's sons. And so one by one they pass by until they all go by, and none of them, God has refused all of them, except for this young shepherd boy that is out looking after those sheep. He is called in, and he is the one that is chosen and anointed. And from that moment on, God is with him. And I think we love David because at a very young age, we just see his love and his passion for God.
One of my favorite parts, I think, of his life story is that exact scene when everyone is really not expecting for him to be the one who is anointed. Everyone's like, David, please. And I think that all of us at some point, want to be chosen, although we don't expect to be chosen. So I do think there's something so beautiful about the fact that God saw David And that's something that I really like. It talks about seeing his heart, not what everyone else sees, the appearances, but going deeper than that, being able to see that his heart was truly, just searching for God and loved God for real. So I think that's something that can take us to our next question, right? The love that David had for God really can translate as to why we consider him such a hero, because we know that he loves God and we see how God works through him because of this. So is that perhaps why we see him as a hero?
I don't think we see him as a hero just because of his love for God, but we see how he approaches, a lot of, let's say, giant situations in his life. Not long after he's chosen, we know the spirit of God leaves Saul, and so all of a sudden now we hear about some of his great qualities. There are members in Saul's camp that saying, "Hey, I know a guy, a son of Jesse. He's a great speaker. He can do music. He's a shepherd." And so a lot of and the Lord is with him, it says in the Bible. And so some of those great qualities come out. And I think because God is with him, it gives David the ability to look at giants in a way that most of us don't see it. And I love the application even very early on in David's life when he goes out to fight Goliath, this behemoth, this giant Philistine from Gath, if you will, who has put the spirit of fear into the entire Israelite army. And David, this very young, precocious boy, is pretty much as Goliath is mocking David in a sense is mocking Goliath. He gets to the point where he says, "Who is this, dare I say, uncircumcised Philistine that has the nerve to speak out against the armies of the Lord?" And I love that, because heroes know how to step up in very tough and challenging situations. And I think that's one of the first glimpses we get of David. He says, "Hey, I fought lions, like you said earlier. I fought bears. In the same way that God delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he's going to deliver me from the hand of the Philistines." And David just gives us, with this gusto and gumption, gives us the ability to say, "Hey, as David can speak up against these particular giants and Goliaths in his life, the literal ones, we can also speak to the giants in our lives as well, saying, hey, I have gone through challenges, whether it was from my youth or current challenges right now, but in the name of God, I'm going to come forward and God is going to declare victory over the obstacles in my life." And I think that is why we call David a hero. He steps up in the biggest of challenges when no other individual will go in and step up to the plate. This young man of God does.
Amen. That was a whole evangelistic series. I feel like you just kind of told us to wake up, and it's a revolution.
Hey, he's a
We have
hero.
to
He's got to do it.
It's a hero who inspires us, right? Because that's what ultimately heroes are there to do, to inspire us to do better, to be our best selves, to stand up to our own giants. Now we're praising him for all of these things, and we're saying, David, he's over here defeating, like they said in the Bible, he's defeating 10,000. Saul defeated only 5. Like we're talking about all these things that he was able to defeat, that he was able to conquer, all of these giants that he's just bringing down and stepping up to. But we do know that David did struggle with some things. Some things were not as easy to step up to and conquer. Can we talk a little bit about those struggles?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And especially in today's day and age, a lot of great men and even men in general will sometimes struggle with this internal conflict, and sometimes lust often comes into the situation. We see early on in 2 Samuel, David, has kind of been made king of I believe, Judah, and then eventually both Israel and Judah. And then, one day the men are off to war, and he sees, a woman by the name of Bathsheba, and she is bathing on a roof. He's on another roof, and he lets his eyes wander, and he lets his mind get the better of him, and he starts going down this dark spiral, pretty much breaking half of the Decalogue, half of the 10 Commandments in this situation, not honoring his father and his mother, in some cases pretty much committing adultery, wanting to bear false witness because he's trying to get Uriah back from war, Bathsheba's rightful husband at the time. Once she finds out Bathsheba is with child, trying to blame his mistakes on somebody else. He's not honoring God, and he's not honoring man, and he breaks all of these commandments, and God punishes David, this hero that we hold up in high regard and esteem, punishes David by taking away this first child. And Nathan, I believe a prophet, if you will, has to come and call David out on his mess. And so thank God for the people in our lives who can come and call out both regular humans and heroes out on their mess and get them to the point where they need to go and confess their sins, acknowledge what they've done, and then ultimately ask God for forgiveness.
You know, something that we've been learning in this Bible biographies, heroes biography series, is that a lot of our heroes, people that we admire in the Bible, people that we look up to, they were just like us. They struggled with some big issues. And the most inspiring thing about it, though, is that although they had these issues, although they struggled with their own things, and I like how you just put it, that he kind of like spiraled, because it was one thing after the other, and it just kind of got out of control. And ultimately, sin kind of just takes us out of control. It just drives us down this spiral. But the wonderful thing is that God can still use us, just like he used all of these incredible Bible heroes, even with their struggles. And that leads me to the next point. We do know that he had these struggles. We do know that he had a lot of really low lows. But we also do know, like we mentioned before, that he did love God. So what was this relationship between God and David?
Oh, I think from very early on, you see David's, in a sense, deep connection with God, and you see how it also plays out in human relationships. He loves Saul, in a sense, from the minute he comes into his court. He develops a deep bond with Jonathan, and so you can see that David's reflection and expression for love of God is also played out in love for his neighbors. But also, I think his relationship with God, to me, is one of the most amazing. You get to see the full breadth and depth of David's emotion. A lot of times, which seem to be presumably captured in the Psalms. There are Psalms of extreme joy and elation, thanking God for the things that he has done, and just simply for who God is. David is asking that his behaviors, even in Psalm 19, be at the end of Psalm 19, David is saying, "Hey, let the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be found acceptable in your sight." David is constantly trying to say, Lord, I want you to find me acceptable. I want you to find that what I am doing is right in your eyes. But not only is he doing that, he also, in a sense, acknowledges his sinful behavior. We see that when David says, "Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew within me a right spirit." No hero, no individual on this earth is without flaws and faults. And it is, every hero's job or leader's job to, when they are confronted with this, to acknowledge it and not just go to those that they have offended, but also go to the God who can actually deliver them from the offense and change their heart. And so I think we really enjoy David for seeing the full range of his emotion and his communication with God there.
Yeah, I think that you just kind of verbalize exactly why I personally love David so much. And it's just the fact that we can see all of this range of emotions, the range of things, of characteristics that we find in David. And I just feel like it just feels so real. You know, his entire experience, his entire life just feels so relevant to all of us, because it feels like things that we could go through. His emotions that we see displayed throughout the Psalms are things that we can also relate to. He calls him his rock, his salvation. And I just think of how he sees God always as someone who can take him out of his deepest lows. You know, even when he's in the muddy pit, he helps him to stand on solid ground. Right. And I just think that when we read these words, it resonates with us in our darkest times. It resonates with us when we feel maybe like we have fallen so far that we think that maybe we don't have salvation. To read these words that David wrote, it's almost like we can also join with David in the cry for help. And to see that God, even though he made his mistakes, God never left David. And it's exactly how he is with us. He never leaves us. Even when we do fall, we can always come back.
Amen.
So Elroy, I'm loving this conversation. I love David. I love being able to talk about David, even with all of the things that he did that weren't exactly the best.
Mhm.
But we are coming to the last question. And I think that we've touched upon so many different factors in this discussion that this part is going to be very easy to just join everything into one explanation. And it's, how do we apply now everything that we're learning about David, all of these things that we're seeing in his life, to our very own lives?
Mm. Well, I am no theologian, but what I do know is that every story in the Bible, everything in the Bible, every word, every promise either points to Jesus' first coming or Jesus' second coming. And we look at the story of David pointing to Jesus' first coming. David was a complicated man. We said it at the beginning of this conversation here. But the Lord was still with him. And even though David didn't get to go and rebuild the temple the same way Moses didn't get to be the one to go into the promised land, God still preserves David's lineage by, guess what? Jesus is actually coming through David's lineage. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things, that sometimes out of very messy situations, and even sometimes out of bad behavior, God still finds ways to restore us. And I think that is our promise today, that even as David's life pointed to Christ's first coming, everything we do now in a lot of cases should point to Christ's second coming, that he is coming back to save us and redeem us and eventually take us with him.
Amen. I feel like you can do like an altar calling right now, and it would be like the perfect way to end this, because really you just gave us a message of hope. That even if our lives get a little bit messy, God can always find a way to just glorify himself through us. And that's ultimately what he did with David. So what a powerful, powerful statement. Thank you so much, Elroy, for sharing with us, sharing your insights, sharing your commentary. Definitely, I think that we've grown to love David even more. So thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome, Kenya.
All right. Well, thank you everyone else for joining us on another Heroes to Hero Biographies. We keep learning so much about these heroes that we admire, and we're going to continue learning many more things. So make sure that you come back, you tune in, and you join us for our next conversation here on Heroes to Hero Biographies. Until next time.